Listen carefully. You cannot be at the funeral tomorrow. Instead, you'll do exactly as I say." I held Leo's wrist outside Grace's apartment, rain soaking through his thin jacket, while he clutched a coin jar filled with $12.47. He thought he was saving for his mother's funeral. I had heard Grace's voicemail, Leo's name, a scrape, then breath cut short, and I knew Vivian had lied about something terrible. Leo looked up at me, terrified. "What if she comes?" "Then she finds me," I said, "not you." By the time I locked us inside my dark print shop, his coin jar sat beside the paper cutter, and the blinds hid the street. "Am I allowed to cry now?" he asked. Before I could answer, something touched the front glass from outside. A few hours earlier, I had been printing funeral programs. 200 more programs, Anya, by noon if you can manage it. Vivian Cole stood at my counter in a camel coat still beaded with cold rain, one hand resting on the sample booklet I had printed the night before. The shop was narrow enough that the paper cutter nearly touched the copier bank, and the air smelled of hot toner, glue, and damp wool. I counted the practical details before I trusted anyone. Sunday service, 200 extra copies, cream cardstock, black border, folded once. Vivian spoke as if she were ordering menus, not funeral programs for her younger sister. Grace Cole had supposedly died overnight in hospital, and Vivian wanted every guest handed something polished enough to make the grief look organized. Please subscribe to the channel. "The funeral comes to $7,800, Vivian said, smoothing the folded edge of my sample program with her thumb. "People expect things done properly." I watched that thumb travel over the crease again and again. She had called before opening, voice clipped, saying Grace had gone downhill fast and there had been no time for arrangements. Now she wanted a larger photograph, a cleaner scan of the library logo, and a line beneath Grace's name that read, "Beloved Mother." I asked whether she had a final image. Vivian's eyes flicked toward the front window. "Use the one I emailed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I told her I could have the programs cut and boxed by late morning if she approved the proof immediately. Vivian gave a thin smile, the kind that asked for obedience without bothering to say please. "You're a lifesaver, Anya." She slid a wrinkled sheet across the counter. "And scan this. Pike Family Funeral Home needs a copy." The document was headed Death Certificate, but the signature line at the bottom was blank. No doctor's signature. No official stamp pressed into the paper. My palms went flat on the counter before I noticed I had done it. "It isn't signed," I said. Vivian folded the bottom edge sharply, then smoothed it flat. "They'll receive the signed original tomorrow," she said. "This is only to keep things moving." She looked past me at the machines humming against the wall. "Grace's boy is already upset. We're keeping things in the family." There was something practiced in the phrase, something she had used often enough that it no longer had weight. I scanned the paper anyway, because she was standing in my shop, because her sister had supposedly died, because refusing a grieving woman felt cruel, even while my stomach tightened. The scanner light passed under the unsigned certificate in one clean blue bar. Vivian tapped the counter twice when her phone buzzed. "I need to get back to Grace's apartment. Leo has been asking questions." She lifted the box programs I had finished from the back table, then paused beside the door. "Leave the certificate here. I may need another scan later." She walked into the wet November morning carrying Grace's funeral programs against her chest, her coat bright against the gray sidewalk. When the bell above the door stopped rattling, I picked up the certificate again. The paper was warm where her hand had held it, and I placed it beside my scanner instead of filing it with the ordinary jobs. Vivian had texted an address and told me to bring the program box upstairs. Grace's apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon air freshener, old radiator heat, and the sourness of flowers that had been standing in too little water. Leo sat cross-legged on the living room rug in his school hoodie, dropping coins one at a time into a glass jar. 10, 11, 12, he whispered, then started again when a quarter rolled beneath the coffee table. He was 10, small for the room, and so careful with his hands that I understood immediately he had been told not to touch anything. Vivian took the box from me, checked the top program, and set it beside the front door. A friend once asked me, "What would you have done?" Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Leo held up a crumpled note where he had written the total. $12.47, he said. It can help for Mom's burial. Vivian's mouth made a shape that was almost a smile. Sweet, but useless, she said, loudly enough that I could hear every word while I stood there holding my delivery receipt. Your mother's funeral cost real money, Leo. His face went red, and he tipped the coins into the jar too fast. The clink of them sounded hard and lonely. I asked Vivian where I should put the remaining programs. She pointed to the dining table without looking at me, already arranging them into neat stacks. Leo kept his eyes on the jar when he told me Aunt Vivian had said Grace died in hospital, and then he was not allowed to see her before she was taken away. He said it like a rule from school, not a thing that had broken him. Vivian cut in at once, saying hospitals had rules, and children did not need frightening memories. Then she smoothed the folded edge of a program, once, twice, until the black border had nearly worn a line into the paper. I felt the old reflex to stay useful, stay quiet, get out. Instead, I asked whether anyone from Grace's library had been told. Vivian said she had handled it. I carried the empty program box into the hallway, intending to leave before Vivian found another task for me. Leo followed, the coin jar held tight against his stomach. Ms. Petrescu, he whispered, Mom left this before she went away. He pressed his cheap little phone into my hand, already open to a voicemail. Behind him, Vivian called his name from the apartment, sharper now. I slipped the file onto my own phone with a few quick taps. Grace's voice came through thin and hurried. Leo, if anything happens, don't let Vivian decide everything. Call someone you trust. The message ended with a scrape and a breath. Vivian appeared in the doorway before I could play it again. Her eyes went from Leo's empty hand to my phone, and the color seemed to drain from her face. What did he give you? She asked. I put my hands flat at my sides. A school contact list, I said, hating how easily the lie came. She studied me, smoothing the edge of the nearest program until it bent. Leo stepped backward into the apartment with the jar clasped to his chest. I told Vivian I needed to return to the shop, then walked down the stairs without running, even though Grace's frightened voice was still lodged in my ear. Harland Pike called before I reached the sidewalk. He introduced himself as the funeral director at Pike Family Funeral Home and said Vivian's contract listed Petrescu Print and Copy as the vendor. His voice was low and deliberate, the voice of someone who checked dates twice before signing anything. He asked whether I could come by that afternoon with the certificate scan Vivian had requested. I said yes before I had fully decided why. Back at my shop, I took the original, unsigned certificate from beside the scanner, slid it into a stiff envelope, and drove to the funeral home with Grace's voicemail sitting silent on my phone. Pike Family Funeral Home was warm, dim, and smelled of furniture polish and lilies. Harland Pike was 58, or close to it, broad-shouldered in a dark suit, with reading glasses hanging from a cord against his vest. He led me into a small office where a contract lay open beside a laptop. Ms. Cole has been moving quickly, he said, too quickly for my comfort. He turned the pages toward me. The service total was $7,800. A deposit of $1,950 had been taken from Grace's account. Harlan tapped a printed transaction line, then another page from Vivian's online donation campaign. $2,640 has been collected there, he said, but the unpaid balance is still $3,210. I looked at the figures until they blurred. Harlan told me Grace's account had held $9,300 before the debit and now showed $7,350. Grace had supposedly died overnight, yet money had moved from her account for a funeral arranged by a sister who had not let Leo see his mother. My throat tightened so badly I could barely ask whether Vivian had authorization. Harlan's expression changed, cautious rather than surprised. She said she was handling family matters. I placed the envelope on his desk. This certificate is not signed, I said, and I don't think Grace is dead. Saying it made my hands shake. I kept them flat against my knees. Harland removed the paper, examined the blank signature line, then checked the date printed near the bottom twice. He did not accuse me of overreacting. He simply leaned back and looked toward the closed office door, as if Vivian might be standing on the other side of it. "I have known her only through rushed calls and your print work," he said. "I have not seen a hospital confirmation." He set the certificate beside the funeral contract instead of returning it to me. "I will not release the chapel for tomorrow," Harlan said, "until you verify this document." The room seemed to lose heat. Outside, a hearse idled at the curb, its engine a low mechanical growl beneath the rain. I looked at my phone, at the voicemail file Grace had left for her son, then back at the unsigned paper on Harlan's desk. Vivian had wanted everything to move quickly. For the first time that day, something had stopped. By the time I returned to my shop, late afternoon had pressed the daylight flat against the wet pavement. The copier fans whirred behind me, and the last customers had gone. I had barely set my keys beside the register when Vivian pushed through the door without knocking. She carried her umbrella folded tight under one arm and the unsigned death certificate in a clear plastic sleeve under the other. Her coat was dry now. That bothered me more than it should have. I noticed details when I was frightened. Dry cuffs, clean shoes, a paper held too carefully. Vivian laid the certificate on my counter and smoothed the folded edge with her thumb. "Harlan needs a vendor verification email," she said, "from your business account. Then I need a cleaner scan of this. The one you sent looked amateurish." I kept my hands flat on the counter. "I didn't send a scan." Her eyes did not move at first. Then she smiled, small and patient. "Anya, don't make this harder than it has to be. Pike said you were asking questions. You own a print shop. You understand paperwork. He wants to know the programs came from a legitimate vendor, and I need you to confirm that Grace's service is proceeding." She tapped the plastic sleeve with one pale fingernail. "It is a simple email." The shop smelled sharply of warm toner and the lemon cleaner I used on the counters. I looked at the certificate without touching it. The name was Grace Cole. The date was today. The signature line was still blank, but Vivian had placed a dark strip of tape over that part, as if hiding the absence would make it less real. "A legitimate vendor doesn't verify a funeral," I said. "I verify print jobs." Vivian's smile thinned. "You printed the programs. That makes you part of the chain." "No," I said. My voice shook once, and I hated that she heard it. "It makes me the person who put ink on paper." For a few seconds, rain ticked against the front window. Vivian looked toward the street, then turned the lock in the door with a quiet click. She did not flip the sign to closed. She only locked us in. My palms became damp against the laminate counter. "You have a partner, don't you?" she asked. "Colin, the man who works at the water plant?" I did not answer. "And Leo has no one steady except family." Her tone softened, which made it worse. "He is already frightened. He is 10 years old, Anya. He needs familiar people around him, not strangers stirring up chaos because they enjoy feeling important. I don't enjoy this." "No, I can see that." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Then don't make Leo lose his family, too." The sentence slid under my ribs and stayed there. She had not threatened me directly. She had chosen the child because she knew that was where I would break first. I thought of Leo's coin jar, the $12.47 he had gathered while adults made decisions over his head. I thought of Grace's voicemail on my phone, her breath catching before she told him she loved him. Vivian watched my face as if she had set a trap and was waiting for the wire to pull. "I'll prepare the email," I said. Her shoulders loosened. "Good. Keeping things in the family is kinder than people realize." She turned toward the copier bank, expecting me to scan the certificate immediately. Instead, I opened my order management screen and typed slowly, making her wait while I pretended to search for the funeral program invoice. My shop account showed no completed verification request from Pike Family Funeral Home, only Vivian's earlier rush order. She needed my verified business address because Harlan had stopped trusting her. She could not finish this without someone else making the documents look ordinary. "The scan first," she said. I fed the certificate into the flatbed scanner. The machine's light traveled beneath the plastic sleeve, a bright bar crossing Grace's name, the false date, the taped-over signature line. Vivian stood close enough that I could smell expensive hand cream beneath the cold air on her coat. When the preview appeared, I enlarged it, then clicked into the file information window. The scanner had preserved the embedded source details from the earlier image, a device name, a timestamp, a location tag. My pulse began to pound in my ears. Vivian shifted behind me. "Is there a problem?" "Dust on the glass," I said. I opened a drawer below the register, took out a small USB drive, and copied the metadata report before she could see the progress bar. Riverside Storage Yard appeared in the location field. Unit information had been clipped from the preview, but the yard name remained, plain and impossible to explain away. I removed the drive and curled it inside my fist. Then I printed the cleaner scan Vivian wanted. She watched the page slide out, took it from the tray, and tucked the original certificate back into her plastic sleeve. Again, she smoothed its folded edge. "The email," she reminded me. "I haven't sent it," I said. Her gaze hardened. "Send it soon." She unlocked the door and stepped outside into the blue-gray evening. I waited until her umbrella opened and she disappeared past the neighboring bakery window. Only then did I let myself breathe. The USB drive had left a small red mark in my palm. I locked the shop, slipped it into my coat pocket, and turned my phone screen toward the darkening street. Riverside Storage Yard sat beyond the warehouses near the river, where the streetlights were spaced too far apart and every puddle reflected a broken strip of orange. I drove there with the USB drive on the passenger seat and Grace's voicemail open on my phone, though I did not press play. I had listened to it enough. Her voice had become part of the car, thin, frightened, trying not to frighten Leo. The yard entrance was chained open for late access, and a faded sign warned against trespassing after office hours. I parked outside the gate instead of driving in. My hands were trembling so badly that I had to grip the steering wheel with both palms until the shaking eased. The metadata report had given me only Riverside Storage Yard, not a reason. It could have been an old location tag. It could have been Vivian storing boxes. It could have been nothing. I said those possibilities aloud while I walked through the gate because silence made every metal door seem like it was holding its breath. Rows of storage units stretched under weak security lamps. Rainwater ran along the concrete in narrow black streams. The air smelled of wet cardboard, diesel, and the river. I took out my phone and opened the device finder screen Leo had shown me earlier, the one linked to Grace's old phone through the family account. The map loaded slowly. A blue circle pulsed once near the middle row, vanished, then returned. My throat tightened. The dot was not moving. It was pinned between two corrugated metal buildings where the unit numbers were painted in peeling black stencils. I followed them on foot, 206, 208, 210. The rain had thinned to a cold mist that clung to my hair and eyelashes. At Unit 214, the phone screen vibrated in my hand. The map pulsed again. I raised Grace's voicemail to my ear, not to listen, but because the device finder tone had begun making a faint electronic chirp beneath it. The sound came from behind the roll-up door. For one awful second, I could not move. I kept my hands flat against my thighs, exactly as I did when fear tried to make me useless. The door had a fresh padlock, silver against rusted metal. There was no window, no gap wide enough to see through. A strip of duct tape covered something near the bottom seam. I crouched and saw a black charging cable slipping beneath the door, disappearing into the dark. "Grace?" I said, and my voice came out too low. Nothing answered. Wind rattled the neighboring doors. Somewhere near the office, a loose sign banged against its post. I told myself I had made a mistake, that a phone could be stored anywhere, that I was standing in a commercial yard after dark, calling the name of a woman who had supposedly died that morning. Then I knocked. 3 taps, hard enough to hurt my knuckles. At first there was only the rain. Then, from inside Unit 214, came a weak udar, one dull strike against metal. I froze. A second strike followed, slower. Then another. Not machinery, not wind. A person using what little strength she had left. "Grace!" I pressed my face close to the door. "It's Anya Petrescu. Leo is safe. Can you hear me?" A sound dragged across the other side of the metal, soft and uneven. It might have been a hand. It might have been someone trying to stand. My stomach dropped so violently I thought I would be sick. I looked at the padlock, then at the empty lane behind me. Vivian could come back at any time. If she had put Grace here, she would know how to remove her. And if she knew I had found this place, Leo would be alone in that apartment with her. Inside, something scraped again. I heard a breath, or imagined one. "Help," a woman rasped. The word was so faint I might have missed it if I had not been already leaning against the door. My knees nearly gave way. Grace was alive. Vivian had taken money from her account, ordered funeral programs, built a donation page, and tried to bury her sister while she was locked behind a steel door. The thought had no room in my head. It was too large, too ugly. I saw only pieces: the blank signature line, Vivian's dry coat, Leo's coins clinking in a jar. Would you keep this hidden for one more minute, or say it out loud and risk everything? Write which choice you would make. I was about to make mine, and what happened next would not leave Leo untouched. I stepped back from Unit 214 and forced myself to think in practical order. First, emergency services. Then, Leo. I dialed with my thumb slipping across the screen and gave the operator the yard name, the unit number, the locked door, the woman inside. I said Grace's name twice. The operator told me officers and medical help were being sent and asked whether I could remain at a safe distance. I said yes, although every part of me wanted to tear at the lock until my fingers split. When the call ended, I used the device finder one more time. Grace's phone pulsed behind the door, blue and steady. I took a photo of the unit number, the lock, the cable under the seam, and the wet lane around it. Then I backed away without turning my back on the door. At the gate, I looked down the road toward the apartment where Leo was with Vivian. My chest felt crushed by the distance between them. I ran to my car, left the yard lights behind me, and drove toward Leo's street before the first siren reached Riverside. At 7:30 on Saturday evening, I found Leo halfway down the cracked walk outside Grace's apartment building, walking as if every step had to be counted before he could take the next one. Rain had darkened his hair and the shoulders of his thin jacket. He held the coin jar under one arm, its lid screwed on tight, and stared through the glass at the mixed silver and copper inside. His lips moved silently. $12.47, he whispered when I reached him. I thought if I got more tomorrow, maybe Mr. Pike would let Mom have a nicer funeral. The words lodged in my throat. Behind the apartment windows, no lights showed in Grace's rooms. Vivian had left Leo there while she waited outside my shop for the email that would make her lie look official. I caught his wrist before he could pass me. My own hands wanted to shake, so I kept them flat around his small sleeve. Listen carefully. You cannot be at the funeral tomorrow. Instead, you'll do exactly as I say. Leo's face went blank in the way children's faces do when fear is too big to show all at once. I told him we were not going inside, not even for his backpack, because Vivian might return. I told him I had heard his mother's voicemail and found something that meant Grace might still be alive. His eyes lifted to mine, wide and wet. Aunt Viv said Mom died at the hospital, he said. She said I had to be good at the funeral, then she was taking me to her cousin in another state. She said nobody would want me after. My stomach tightened until it hurt. She lied about something very important, I said, choosing each word because he was 10 and I was asking him to trust me with the only parent he believed he had lost. I don't know everything yet. Police are going to check, but I know you are not going anywhere with Vivian tonight or tomorrow. He looked back toward the apartment door, where the coin jar had lived beside the sink all day. My clothes are in there. I said we could replace clothes. We could not replace him. The rain ticked against the parked cars, and somewhere a dog barked behind a fence. Leo clutched the jar harder. "What if she comes?" he asked. "Then she finds me," I said, "not you." He studied me as if I were another page he had to read carefully. "You printed the programs," he said. "Maybe you're helping her." It was fair. I had printed the first batch before I knew Grace's name was being used like a locked door. I swallowed and told him that was why I had to fix what I could. I showed him the missed call log on my phone, then let him hear the few seconds of Grace's thin voicemail again. Leo's name, a scrape, breath cut off. His fingers loosened from the jar. "That's her," he said. "She says my name when I'm sick." For 1 second, I saw hope move across his face, and it frightened me more than despair. Hope could break a child twice. My car was 2 streets away. I kept him close as we walked, checking every reflection in every wet shop window. At the corner, a dark sedan slowed, then continued past us. Leo pressed against my side. I did not tell him that Vivian had warned me about making him lose family. I did not tell him I had heard Grace striking metal from inside Unit 214. I said only, "If I tell you to get down in the back seat, you do it. If I tell you not to answer a phone, you don't answer it." He nodded, whispering, 1247, as though the number could keep him steady. At my print shop, I parked behind the building and led him through the delivery entrance. The front lights were off. Vivian's coat was gone from the pavement, but that did not make the air easier to breathe. Leo carried the coin jar across the dark shop and set it beside the paper cutter. I locked the rear door, then the front door, then pulled the blinds down until the street disappeared. He stood in the toner-smelling dark while I checked the deadbolt twice. "Am I allowed to cry now?" he asked. Before I could answer, something touched the front glass from outside. At dawn on Sunday, Riverside Storage Yard looked washed of color, all wet concrete, steel doors, and pale vapor rising from the drainage ditch. Colin Reed found me beside the locked gate after his overnight shift ended and my emergency voicemail reached him. He still wore his water treatment plant jacket, reflective strips catching the cruiser lights. "Give me the address," he had said when he called, before he asked whether I was hurt. Now he put one hand against the middle of my back and looked toward Unit 214. "You kept Leo safe alone all night?" he asked quietly. I nodded. There was no pride in it, only exhaustion and the sour taste of fear. Officer Mira Bennett arrived with 2 officers and a paramedic crew. She had received my report, the photographs, and the copies I had sent from the shop before dawn. She stated each instruction once. I was to stand back. Nobody was to touch the lock. Colin was to remain beside me. When she asked whether I was certain someone had answered, I said, "I heard her say help." The bolt cutter snapped through the padlock with a hard metallic crack. The door rolled upward slowly. The smell that came out was stale water, urine, and cold metal. Grace Cole lay on flattened cardboard beside a plastic storage tote, one wrist rubbed raw, her face gray beneath tangled hair. The paramedics moved fast. Grace tried to speak before they lifted her, but her mouth was too dry. I knelt near her shoulder and told her my name. Her eyes opened a fraction. "Leo?" she rasped. "He's with me," I said. "He's safe." Her fingers caught weakly at my sleeve. "Monday," she breathed. I was going to take Vivian off my account Monday. Then her eyes shut again as the paramedic gave instructions I could barely hear. I understood one thing clearly. Grace could identify the woman who had done this. Colin squeezed my shoulder, and I realized he had gone rigid beside me. A car turned into the yard before the ambulance doors closed. Vivian stepped out, carrying a cardboard box of funeral programs and a folded death certificate. Her face changed when she saw the officers. "This is a private family matter," she said, smoothing the folded edge of the certificate with her thumb. Officer Bennett walked toward her. "Harlan Pike canceled the service after the verification was withdrawn," she said. "The donation page has been frozen. Put the box down." Vivian looked at me, then at Grace on the stretcher, and something naked and furious moved behind her careful expression. "I came to get my sister," Vivian said. "She needs help." Officer Bennett took Grace's phone from the unit floor, sealed it in an evidence bag, and held out her hand for the document. Vivian did not give it over. Her thumb kept working the crease in the paper. "You have no proof," she said. Officer Bennett answered once. "I have enough." The handcuffs clicked around Vivian's wrists while the ambulance pulled away with Grace inside. Vivian's hand froze on one folded program as the officers guided her toward the police vehicle. 4 days later, Thursday morning had been filled with hospital calls, police updates, borrowed blankets, and boxes carried into the new apartment Colin and I had barely had time to call home. The kitchen smelled of dust, cardboard, and coffee. Leo sat cross-legged on the floor with a marker in his fist, carefully labeling boxes, while Grace rested on the second-hand sofa beneath a blue throw. She was alive, but not well. Dehydration had left her weak, and every sudden sound made her shoulders jump. The coin jar stood on the counter beside a box marked "Kitchen," where Leo had placed it himself after asking if it could stay somewhere not sad. "Plates," Leo read aloud, writing each letter slowly. "Cups, pans." Colin carried in another carton and set it down with a theatrical groan. "What does this one say, Supervisor?" Leo squinted at the label. "Books," he said. "Heavy books." Colin smiled. "That tracks." Grace watched them with both hands around a mug of tea. Her eyes had a bruised, distant look, but when Leo glanced at her, she gave him a small smile that held. "You kept trying to help me," she said, "even when you thought I was gone." Leo twisted the marker cap. "I saved the coins," he said. "I didn't know what else to do." Grace reached for him, slowly enough that he could move away if he wanted. He went to her without hesitation and leaned his head against her arm. "Are you coming home?" he asked. The question silenced the room. Grace kissed his hair. "Not today," she said. "I have to get stronger, and we have to find a place where Aunt Vivian cannot reach us. But I am coming home to you." Leo nodded against her sleeve, accepting the answer because it was honest. I watched Colin take the marker from the floor and add a label to the last box. Leo's things. He did not ask permission. He simply made room. Later, while Grace slept, Colin stood beside me at the kitchen counter. "My shifts change next month," he said. "I can ask for fewer overnight rotations. I should have noticed how much you were carrying." I wanted to tell him that noticing was not the same as undoing, but he was already opening his calendar, making calls, moving his life around in practical blocks of time. Leo looked up from the floor. "Colin," he said, "can you help me put the books near Mom?" Colin crouched beside him. "Yeah," he said. "Show me where." Leo handed him a box cutter with complete trust. Grace's recovery would be long. Vivian's arrest did not restore the nights Grace had spent behind a metal door, or the terror Leo had learned to carry in a coin jar. But in that cramped apartment, with labels crooked on the boxes and Grace breathing softly on the sofa, the lie had stopped owning the room. What warning would you have believed, and which one would you have ignored? In the next story, a missed message will uncover another family secret. Subscribe so you do not miss it.